September 15, 1940, a Hawker Hurricane screams through the skies above Kent at 23,000 feet. Squadron leader Douglas Bader yanks his aircraft into a violent left bank. Tracer fire slices through the air where his cockpit was just moments before. Behind him, a German Messerschmitt Bf 109 closes in for the kill. The same fighter that's already taken down two of his squadron mates this morning. Here's the nightmare. Bader can't see it. None of them can, and that's exactly why they're dying. The numbers don't lie. In just 4 months of aerial combat over Britain, RAF Fighter Command watches 1,547 aircraft get torn from the sky. German fighters account for 792 of those kills, the truly terrifying part. In nearly 3 out of 4 cases, British pilots never catch a glimpse of their attacker before bullets start ripping through their fuselage. They're being hunted like prey, fighting an enemy they can't even see. The Hurricane can outmaneuver the Bf 109 in a turn. Every British pilot knows this fact, but you can't dodge death when you don't know it's coming. The Hurricane's rear visibility is catastrophically flawed. That armored headdress designed to protect pilots from frontal attacks creates a blind zone extending 45 degrees on either side of the tail. Pilots contort their bodies, twisting their necks until vertebrae crack, desperately scanning for the enemy climbing behind them. Some wrench their muscles so badly they can't turn their heads for days. By October 1940, the statistics reveal a grim reality. The average Hurricane pilot survives just 87 hours of combat flight time for weeks. That's the lifespan between a young man's first mission and his last. What nobody realizes, yet not Bader, not the commanding officers, not even the German pilots hunting them, is that a 34-year-old engineer with 0 aeronautical credentials and a workshop filled with scrap materials has already cracked the code. His answer costs 11 shillings per aircraft. The Air Ministry will call it laughable. Senior engineers will insist it defies aerodynamic laws. Test pilots will refuse to fly with it attached to their wings. And it will rescue more lives than any other modification in Royal Air Force history. August 1940, Royal Aircraft Establishment, Farnborough. Britain's sharpest aeronautical minds pack into a conference room. Air Vice Marshal Trafford Leigh-Mallory stands before a blackboard covered in diagrams and death statistics. The data paints a brutal picture of systematic annihilation. Gentlemen, we're being destroyed in the visibility war. Leigh-Mallory begins, pointing to a Hurricane cockpit diagram. Our men have a 90-degree blind zone directly behind them. The 109 pilot slides into that zone, closes to 200 yards, and opens fire. Our pilot doesn't know death is coming until shells tear through his fuel tanks. The proposed fixes fill 3 pages of technical documents. Hawker Aircraft suggests completely redesigning the canopy structure. Timeline: 18 months minimum, assuming no production delays. Another engineering team proposes installing mirror systems, but wind tunnel testing shows they create turbulence that reduces top speed by 4 miles per hour. At combat altitude, that speed difference means watching a bomber escape instead of intercepting it. Dr. Frederick Lindemann, Churchill's scientific advisor, pushes for rearward-facing cameras with cockpit display screens. Problem: the technology doesn't exist yet. Development timeline unknown, cost astronomical. Squadron leader Peter Townsend, recently wounded in a dogfight he never saw developing, offers the pilot's perspective. We're destroying our necks trying to look behind us. I've watched men injure muscles so severely they can't move their heads for a week. And still the 109 slipped through. We need to see what's behind us without physically turning around. Simple as that. Henry Tizard, chairman of the Aeronautical Research Committee, responds flatly. There is no simple answer. The Hurricane's design is locked in. We can't relocate the headrest, its armor plating, essential for keeping pilots alive. We can't elevate the pilot seat. The cockpit geometry prohibits it. We absolutely can't extend the canopy. That would require retooling every production facility in Britain while we're already drowning trying to replace combat losses. The expert consensus is unanimous and devastating. Improving rear visibility demands fundamental airframe redesign. The Hurricane will continue fighting with its fatal blind spot. pilots will keep dying at current rates until the Spitfire, with its superior visibility, can become the primary fighter. Estimated timeline, mid-1941. The stakes couldn't be more critical. RAF Fighter Command is hemorrhaging experienced pilots faster than training schools can produce replacements. Every week, the Luftwaffe grows more aggressive. Hitler's invasion fleet masses in French harbors. Britain needs an answer now, not 9 months from now. But physics and engineering reality seem to offer no way forward. The meeting ends with 0 actionable solutions. That same day, at Brooklands Aircraft Factory in Surrey, Frederick George Miles doesn't look like someone about to revolutionize fighter combat. At 34, he's a self-taught engineer who left school at 16 to work in his father's furniture workshop. He holds no university degree, no formal aeronautics training, and no business modifying His Majesty's fighters. What he does possess is a small aircraft company building training planes under contract and an obsessive attention to what pilots actually say when they think nobody important is listening. Miles spends his lunch breaks in the factory canteen, just listening. Today, a Hurricane pilot named James Nicholson is describing his recent combat action with unusual detail. Nicholson will later receive the Victoria Cross for continuing to attack a German bomber while his aircraft burned around him. But right now, he's fixated on a different problem. "I knew someone was back there," Nicholson says, stirring weak tea. "I could sense it, you know? That feeling when someone's watching you. But I couldn't verify it without breaking formation and turning. By the time I did turn, he'd already started firing. Put 20mm rounds straight through my reserve tank." Miles leans forward intently. "What if you could see him without turning?" Nicholson shakes his head. "They tried mirrors." "Doesn't work, not mirrors," Miles says slowly, an idea crystallizing in his mind. "What if the air itself could warn you?" That evening, Miles stays late in his workshop, surrounded by fabric samples and technical drawings. He's thinking about something he observed during a winter windstorm months ago. The way fabric stretched across a frame vibrated and rippled in turbulent air, creating visible patterns that revealed invisible wind currents. Aircraft move through air the same way. They leave wakes disturbed air trailing behind them like the wake behind a ship cutting through water. A pursuing fighter has to fly through that disturbed air to close for an attack. What if there was a method to make that disturbance visible to the pilot being pursued? Miles pulls out a roll of lightweight cotton fabric, the same material used for control surface covering on aircraft. He cuts a strip 18 inches long and 3 inches wide. At his workbench, he fashions a simple frame from piano wire, the high-tensile steel wire used for aircraft control cables. The fabric strip mounts to the frame with quick-release fasteners. The concept is absurdly simple. Mount these fabric strips on the Hurricane's upper wing surface just behind the cockpit, where the pilot can see them in his peripheral vision without turning his head. When a pursuing aircraft enters the Hurricane's wake, the disturbed air will cause the fabric strips to flutter and ripple in distinctive patterns. The pilot won't need to crane his neck around. He'll see the warning in his peripheral vision and know instantly, instinctively, that an enemy is closing from behind. Miles sketches out the mounting configuration. The strips will attach to the wing's leading edge, angled slightly upward to catch maximum airflow. Total weight, 4 ounces, total cost, 11 shillings for materials and labor. He stares at his crude prototype. It looks like something a child might construct for a school science project. The Air Ministry will laugh him out of the building. He decides to test it anyway, consequences be damned. September 3, 1940, Brooklands Aerodrome, 6:15 in the morning. Miles arrives before dawn carrying his fabric strips in a canvas bag. Parked on the tarmac sits a Hurricane Mark I that's been grounded for routine maintenance, officially unavailable for flight testing. Miles has convinced the maintenance crew chief, a man named Albert Simmons, to look the other way for 20 minutes. "This is completely irregular, Mr. Miles," Simmons mutters, helping position a ladder against the Hurricane's wing. "If the group captain discovers I let you modify a service aircraft without authorization, then we won't tell him," Miles replies, climbing onto the wing. The fabric strips attach with spring clips he's designed to grip the wing's leading edge. Installation takes 12 minutes. The strips flutter gently in the morning breeze, looking utterly ridiculous against the Hurricane's war-weary camouflage paint. Test pilot George Bullman arrives, coffee in hand, and stops dead when he sees Miles's handiwork. "What in God's name is that?" "Visibility enhancement system," Miles says, climbing down. "It looks like you've decorated a fighter with ladies' handkerchiefs. Will you actually fly it?" Bullman circles the aircraft slowly, examining the strips with growing skepticism. "The Air Ministry hasn't approved this modification. This hasn't been wind tunnel tested. We have zero data on how it affects handling characteristics. For all we know, those strips could tear off at high speed and damage the tail surfaces, or they could save lives." Miles counters, "That's not how we do things. There are procedures, protocols, safety reviews. While we follow procedures, pilots are dying. 87 hours, George. That's the average combat life expectancy right now, 87 hours. Bullman stares at the fabric strips, then at Miles, his jaw tightens. "If something goes wrong up there, it's my license, I know, and if this works, you're taking full credit. I'm not having my name attached to something that looks this bloody ridiculous. Deal." Bullman climbs into the cockpit. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine coughs, then roars to life with that distinctive growl. Miles watches from the flight line as the Hurricane taxis to the runway, turns into the wind, and accelerates. The tail lifts, the wheels leave the ground. The fabric strips flutter violently in the slipstream, but they hold. For 20 minutes, Bullman puts the Hurricane through aggressive maneuvers. Steep climbs, sharp turns, high-speed dives. When he lands, his face is unreadable. Miles's heart pounds as Bullman climbs down. "Well," Miles asks, "they work?" Bullman says quietly, "I had Simmons chase me in the Miles Master Trainer. Every time he close to within 400 yards, the strips went absolutely mad. Different patterns depending on his position. Flutter from directly behind, ripple from the quarter. I could tell where he was without looking. Miles, I could tell where he was without turning my head. So we show this to the Air Ministry." Bullman laughs bitterly. "You show this to the Air Ministry, they'll have you committed to an asylum. This violates every principle of clean aerodynamic design. It's fabric tape stuck to a fighter aircraft with spring clips. Senior engineers will call it amateurish, dangerous, and absurd. They'll never approve it. Then what do? We bypass them," Bullman says. "We go straight to someone who cares more about dead pilots than proper procedure." September 10, 1940. Fighter Command Headquarters, Bentley Priory, 2:30 in the afternoon. The conference room fills with hostile faces. Air Vice Marshal Lee Mallory has assembled the same experts who declared the visibility problem unsolvable 3 weeks earlier. Now they're being informed that a furniture maker's son with fabric strips has found a solution they missed. Miles stands at the front of the room, his crude prototype mounted on a demonstration board. Dr. Joseph Smith, who took over at Supermarine after R.J. Mitchell, examines the strips with barely concealed contempt. "This is your solution?" Smith asks. "Fabric tape. Fabric strips mounted on spring clips," Miles corrects. "They detect disturbances in the airflow caused by pursuing aircraft and provide visual warning to the pilot. Aerodynamically impossible," declares Dr. William Farron from the Royal Aircraft Establishment. The Hurricane's own slipstream would cause constant flutter. The pilot would be seeing false warnings continuously. This would be worse than useless. It would be actively distracting. "Test data shows otherwise," Miles replies, distributing Bullman's flight report. In 17 simulated attack approaches, the strips provided accurate warning in 17 cases, 0 false positives. The room erupts. "Unauthorized testing on a service aircraft," someone shouts. "Where's the wind tunnel data? What about structural loading at high speed? This violates Air Ministry specification F-36/34." Sir Henry Tizard stands, raising his hand for silence. "Mr. Miles, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we cannot modify frontline fighters based on one unauthorized test flight. These strips could tear off and cause catastrophic damage. They could affect handling characteristics in combat conditions. They could create turbulence that reduces performance. Without proper testing protocols, how many pilots died while you were discussing testing protocols?" Miles interrupts. The room goes silent. "Yesterday, we lost 14 Hurricanes. Last week, 41. The Luftwaffe is killing our pilots because they can't see their attackers. I'm offering a solution that costs 11 shillings per aircraft and takes 20 minutes to install. How many more men have to die before we try something different? That's quite enough, Tizard says coldly. This meeting is, show me. Every head turns. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding has entered quietly and now stands at the back of the room. At 58, Dowding commands our RAF Fighter Command and bears personal responsibility for every pilot's death. His face looks carved from stone, his eyes haunted by casualty lists that grow longer each day. Sir, Miles manages, show me how they work. Not in a conference room, in the air. Air Chief Marshal, Tizard protests, this device hasn't been properly evaluated. Neither had radar when I approved its installation. Dowding cuts him off. Neither had the Spitfire's 8-gun armament. Neither had a dozen other innovations that everyone said were impossible until we made them work. Mr. Miles, you'll demonstrate your strips tomorrow at Notholt. I'll observe personally. If they work as you claim, I'll authorize immediate field testing with operational squadrons. If they don't work, you'll remove them and never waste my time again, understood? Yes, sir. Gentlemen, Dowding addresses the room. We're losing this battle. Not because our pilots lack courage or skill, but because they're fighting blind. If fabric strips can change that, I don't care if they look ridiculous or violate aerodynamic principles. I care whether they save lives. Meeting adjourned. September 11th, 1940. RAF Notholt, 10 in the morning. 3 Hurricanes sit on the flight line. One has Miles's fabric strips installed, the other 2 are unmodified. Dowding stands with his arms crossed, watching as squadron leader Douglas Batter, the legless pilot, who's become a legend, examines the strips with open skepticism. You want me to fly with handkerchiefs on my wings? Batter asks, I want you to survive. Miles replies simply. The test protocol is straightforward. 2 Hurricanes will attempt to position themselves in Batter's blind spot and close to firing range without being detected. Batter will fly the stripped Hurricane first, then an unmodified aircraft for comparison. Radio silence throughout. Batter must rely entirely on visual detection. Batter takes off, climbs to 15,000 feet, and begins flying a combat air patrol pattern. Below, Dowding watches through binoculars as the 2 chase aircraft maneuver into position. In the stripped Hurricane, Batter sees the fabric strips in his peripheral vision. They're calm, fluttering gently in smooth air. Then suddenly, the left strip begins rippling. Not violently, a distinctive wave pattern moving from front to back. Batter glances left and back. Nothing visible yet, but the strip doesn't lie. He brakes hard left, pulling for G's, and a Hurricane flashes through the space he just vacated.